We know each other for many years. We agree on not so many things. That's why I invited him here. It's come also from Frank. So I start once more for Frank. This is Holger Hermanns. That's what I started with. And I said, we know each other for many years. We agree on not so many things. And that's why I invited him. Just to say 2 words or 3 words about him. Once, some years ago, he did win an ERC grant, which is a really big achievement. And in the moment, he is the boss of a Sonderforschungsbereich together with Dresden University. This is a very big project, the biggest kind of project that Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft gives to. So you see, he has apparently something to say, and we are looking now what he will say.
Okay, good. I think, Wolfgang, we agree on one thing, maybe that we disagree. Okay. So, right, good. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I hope you're enjoying the afternoon with me a bit. So I anticipated the tradition here that it is a good idea to have random titles that do not relate so well to the contents. So in this line, you will take my talk. Taming the AI monster. Let's see what this brings to you. I start with a slogan. This is actually the slogan of this so-called Sonderforschungsbereich. The slogan is that, first of all, there is an explosion of opportunities for software-driven innovations. Nowadays, this is what we all see, right? But this comes with an implosion of our human opportunities and capabilities to understand and control these innovations. This is more or less what drives actually my research, but also in the order of 60 people that are working in the Sonderforschungsbereich. And I here have 2 examples that I will cover during the talk. One is the example of individual fairness. So the idea is you have like a number of candidates that are applying to your university, and they send their CVs. And what is the future, if it's not the present, is that the CVs as PDFs are directly uploaded to some LLM, together with the prompt engineering and fine-tuning that gives a Boolean answer or a numerical answer, right? A Boolean answer would be to the question, is this candidate better than that candidate? And it would say yes or no. Or here, the idea being that there is a score between 0 and 1 that is returned, and then once all the candidates are scored, someone puts the bar and says 0 to 7 maybe is the acceptance threshold. Right? This is reality in some places already, but of course there's a lot of let's say looking over the shoulder of this black box AI system that is there. Right? But I think this is where things go. And of course here individual fairness is at stake, right? I mean, the system should be fair to each individual candidate. I have another example that is a bit more from the past now. This is what we call software doping. You know this as the so-called diesel scandal. Now what was that? That was a problem in software. And the problem was that these cars at that time were, especially diesel cars, were undergoing certain emission tests. And the emission test was very, very precisely defined, which made it possible to have reproducible and comparable results. You could take different car models, you could say this one is better than that, because you would just put them on this very precisely defined track. And for that they would be put on a so-called chassis dynamometer, right? So they wouldn't move, right? They would just be there and they would be right, doing as if they were driving. Okay? And then what Volkswagen did, they did this. So if you look into the software that Volkswagen used back then, which was produced by Bosch and had the note that it should never make it into productive code, but Volkswagen wrote this. What they have here, you see basically the distance traveled on one axis, and you see the time in seconds, 1,200 seconds. And what you find in the code, you find pairs of piecewise linear functions that are hard-coded in that. And then you have emission cleaning is enabled whenever you are in the white area. And once you touch the gray area, emission cleaning stops. Okay? So we have to drive very precisely in order to have emission cleaning on. And now if you wonder what these things are, well, especially the one on the right, here we have time and speed. If you build the integral over speed, you get distance, right? And then you find that actually the track that is tested on is precisely one of these things, right? And the other is if you go full speed and so forth and so forth. So a few test cases, so to speak, that are hard-coded. And for the rest, the diesel engines will clean. Okay, so this is a problem. This is not, you see this is not security, there is no attacker here. It's built in the software, right? The OEM produces software that is not in the interest of the people. Okay? And now, we did a bit of theory, but we also did a bit of practice there. This is another car, which is not from Volkswagen. And so we put this on a chassis dynamometer, and we did some tests. And I can show you one example. So this is, you see the usual one is this blue one is called New European Driving Cycle. But if you vary this a little, then for this red car that you just saw, you can see drastically different emissions being produced, right? So this is this. How do I do this? This is the value for the NEDC, and if you slightly vary this, you get much higher emissions in NOx, right? In nitrous oxides. And well, is this now something that is acceptable or not? Why do you have these tests? Why do you have this test? Of course, because they're supposed to be somehow representative. And there is this extra ruling that says there should be no defeat devices, so you should not somewhat turn off emission cleaning. Okay, but now what does this mean precisely? Here you see a case where you would be able to say, well, this is so drastic that it obviously makes a difference. But if you look, if you try to formalize this, and this is what we did. So we call this doped software, so to speak. Software doping is the term. Then, so what is actually happening here? We have a distance on the input function. So between NEDC and NEDC prime, we have a distance, right? We have a distance between the outputs, right, which is the NOx value at the very end that's accumulated. And then, our way of saying in what sense such a test is kind of binding is to define some threshold, like an envelope, right? So if the two test values are within this envelope, then also the outputs should be in another kind of envelope, right? So for instance here, if you think, well, doubling the emissions would be okay, then you would probably say 180 is the output interval, right? So this part here. And since this is above, you would have a formal argument to say, that is too much, that is actually bad, right? Okay. I will tell a bit more, and we will later see how we're going to save the world from bad AI with the same principles. But I have to do a bit of simple mathematics with you. It's simple. It's not elegant, but it's simple. So first of all, okay, we talk about the opposite. We say when the software is clean, so when it's not doped. This is the software that we want to have, right? And when would we say that the software is clean? Well, if you have some tests, then similar inputs that slightly vary the test inputs should give you similar outputs, right? This is what you saw. And then for the example, we see this as transformers of infinite words. So we have an infinite sequence of inputs. The test is finite. We come to that later, but in principle, it would be an infinite word. We have an infinite sequence of inputs. We have an infinite sequence of outputs. And then what we would ask that would be that as long as we have a trajectory that somehow is in this envelope of kappa I around the inputs, then also the output should stay within kappa O.
What about software that is independent?
Sorry?
What about software that depends on external parameters that you don't want in the API?
Yeah, we have the theory extended also to external parameters. So you can either exclude them, or you can say you should not look into that, and so forth and so forth. Yeah, but right, very nice. This is only the very basic theory. Good. So I use this theory in a few even simpler ways later. So let's go to the so what you see is we assume basically that there's some sort of contract between the producer of the car and the owner of the car, so to speak. Namely, that the producer tells, okay, what were the tests that I have been doing? What is the distance function that I use for inputs and outputs, and what are the thresholds kappa? So you could even say, maybe this producer of a car is better because he gives me, for a larger input, gives me a smaller output threshold, and so forth and so forth. Right? This would give you a way to decide what cars are better or not. Right? Okay. Now, these are the standard inputs. Here, this would be, for instance, the NEDC, the distance function on inputs, and the distance and the thresholds for inputs and outputs, and so forth. This would be in a sort of contract, right? That some manufacturer could offer. Now, I wanted to go to the simpler settings. The simpler settings is this one. Namely, we just have one input and one output. Okay, so we have a deterministic thing that has one input and one output, and then what does this robustness notion actually mean? It basically means that if you take any input that is somehow in some ball around my input, and I take any of those, then, okay, the output that belongs to that should be within this kappa O, right? Now here this is not the case, so you would say this is not clear. Okay, so this is now for a single input, output, so to speak. Right? Now we do this for non-deterministic systems. So this means we have an input, but there may be multiple outputs, and we don't know which ones. Okay, so this now here you see we have one input, but we may have multiple outputs. And then again, for every input it should be the case. And now there's a bit of an issue how you go on, whether you say for each black one there should be a blue one that is at most kappa O apart, or whether you say for each blue one there should be a black one, or whether you say both. Okay, we are saying both. Okay, so this is one direction is that for every blue one there should be a black one, which is not the case for the lower input, right? And then other way around, for every black one there should be a blue one, which is not the case for the leftmost one. Okay, but if all of that would be satisfied, then you have something like, for those who know this is like Hausdorff distance that we're doing here, right? So the Hausdorff distance of the two is bounded by the kappa O. Whenever we are kappa I close to the input that we start with. Okay. Now, what can you do with this? Well, you can, if you are a theory guy, you can try to formulate this in logics. So here is all this in different logics, because you're comparing traces, actually, infinite words. You need a logic that allows you to talk about multiple traces, which is nowadays called hyperlogic. So you take hypertemporal logic, and then we're talking about real values, so you need what is called single temporal logic. So we have hyper single temporal logic. And if you would now have the code of the car, and you would be able to express, which we can, the property in this hyperlogic, then you could use what is called model checking in order to build the state space and to find out whether everything is satisfied, so whether your car is actually clean. Okay? So this is one thing you can do. It's called model checking, right? So if we know a model of our program, then we can basically do this. It doesn't scale very well, but it has a fundamental problem, namely so-called intellectual property. The owner of the software, even though the software is bad, the owner of the software has the right not to disclose the software, right? So we are surrounded by software where we always sign these kind of license agreement, we don't even read them and so forth and so forth. But, I mean, especially, we don't have the right to look at them because it's intellectual property, and sometimes it may be harmful, right? For instance, here, it was harmful, okay? So this only came out because there was some agency in the US that had the right to look into the software, and then there was a hacker in Germany who managed to break it and then to do the software, right? So factually, mostly we have to work with actually testing, right? So we have to test in order to find out what the system is doing, which you know how to do unit testing and software testing and so forth and so forth. Doing tests on a chassis dynamometer is a bit more costly, right? So you cannot do a lot of tests, right? So this is the story that will come next. So usually testing is, okay, you generate some input, you propose it to the system executes it and proposes an output, you look at the output, you generate the next input and so forth, and you can do fuzzing and all kinds of things in order to be creative and how to do that. I guess you know this. Now here, this is, I mean, getting a test cycle there is not so easy. I'm talking about something that the car should then drive, right? You even need a driver to do that then accurately, right? and then you have to fix the car on the adjusted dynamometer, and then you have to try to get the test as you have predicted that, and that can take quite a lot. And this is also quite expensive. So in total we did like 15 tests, right? So there is an issue to do the right tests. Okay, how do we do the right tests? Well, if we would be having a model of our motor, so to speak, then we can, this is the short story, in the model of the motor we can already look for a test cycle that is kind of, let's say, still close, so inside the epsilon envelope, the kappa envelope around the input, but it's somehow promising to show us a variation if we would have a model of the motor. And if we have found that, we take that and we try it in reality, so to speak, right? Okay. So the theory behind it is called probabilistic falsification. This is what hybrid systems people do. They have a topologic formula, which is, it gives you for a certain behavior and a certain property, it gives you yes or no. Now they give this a quantitative semantics, which means they get a number. And if the number is negative, then the property is false. And if the number is positive, then the property is true. And then they use optimization in order to drive the number to the negative, so that they find a variation. Okay, so this is the whole story. So it's a quantitative semantics that they give, and you see how it relates to the satisfaction of the formula. If it's positive, then the formula holds. If it's negative, the formula doesn't hold. And intuitively, what this then means is they have such a continuous trajectory, and then they're trying to, and this is actually happening with things like simulated annealing and so forth. So it's engineering optimization, right? So Monte Carlo methods and so forth and so forth, right? They're trying to find a value that is negative, and sometimes they may bump into a local minimum. Then they are unlucky. Okay, even though there is a global minimum that is
the curves you draw them always continuously. Are they continuous?
The curves are continuous, but we sample them at discrete points. I think that's the main thing. So we sample every second. Yeah, but the behavior of the exos is obviously continuous, but we just...
Thank you.
Okay. So, good. That was that. So, again, so we actually use this. We use this to drive the model into something that looks bad so that we can test it on the real system. And now, but where do we get the model from? That is the next question, right? Because why should we have a model of the behavior of our motor? Where should we get this from? Now, luckily we did some other work, which is called Lola Drives, which is collecting. Currently we are collecting from 642, I think, cars. We are collecting exhaust output values, together with many other data. So in each modern car that is less than 30 years old, there is an adapter that sits at the knee here. It's the OBD, it's a size like this. And this is where the garage people, they connect their diagnosis device. But it's a European standard, and it's meant to observe, and also you have the right to observe what your motor does if you have the right software. Okay, so you can go there with a cable, or you can buy for €5, you can buy an adapter that gives you a Bluetooth interface to this. Right? So you put it in, and then on the other hand, you Bluetooth. I don't have them with me, but if you want, I send you. We made like 200 of them, and we still have a few left. And then we made, well, what is this? Okay, I have to open the parentheses now. After this disaster with the new European driving cycles, the rules have changed, and now there are new rules in force which are called real driving emissions, which is emission tests on real public roads, but still they have to satisfy a lot of constraints with respect to the acceleration percentages, the percentages on motorways, and so forth and so forth and so forth. That is in a European document. That is in English text. We formalize that in a formal language, pinpointing some issues. Okay, we formalize that. Then we generated a provably correct runtime monitor, so that you can, if you are sitting in your car and you have the runtime monitor with you, you can actually check whether you are doing a real driving emission test. And that all we put into an Android app, right? So, which is called Lola Drives. You can download this from the Google Play, and you can do your own real driving emission tests you need a diesel engine and you need the right NOx sensors to be supported via the interface. You can also just use this to collect data about your car, like the real speed of the car or the lambda thingy there and so forth and so forth. You can see a lot of things. And you can donate this to us. And that's why we have, so we have a data donation option there. And that's why we have a number of people that are donating to us what their car is really doing. And we are using this for some sort of average model of what a car motor does, depending on acceleration and on speed, right? So what we do get is basically, we get these from the database, we get the real driving emission data, and we basically do binning in order, this is again discretization, in order to somehow map speed and acceleration to the axis. And that then we use as a model in order to predict a test. And if we have a nice test for which we use it for risk classification, we take this test, we go to the test facility and we try this out. Okay? This is more or less what is happening there. I want to rush because I will anyway go out of time. So this is one of the tests we then synthesized, and we drove this with Audi A6. And so what you see is basically, what you see is basically that even though there's a slight deviation only, it is in our kappa I. The distance in emissions is a lot, and it's also above the legal limit. This was a known problem with the Audi A6 at that time with this motor. Yeah, I can explain what the problem was. I mean, Volkswagen cheated in a very German engineering way, but others didn't. Like Porsche, they looked at lateral acceleration, which for a Porsche the Porsche usually has lateral acceleration, right? I mean, why shouldn't the Porsche have no acceleration? It must be on the test facility if it doesn't have lateral acceleration, right? So they only looked at that. As soon as lateral acceleration kicked in, they were turning off their exhaust cleaning, right? And so forth. Anyway, so that was the first example of how much time we have. Any clue where I was sitting time-wise? Who is the chair? Wolfgang is the chair. You have to tell me how many minutes I still have. Okay. Anyway, I just go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, good. So that was the first example. Now comes something seemingly different, maybe individual fairness. Okay. The keyword is Markov property. You have now all forgotten the first half, and you have all forgotten that it was already taking 20 minutes, so what I reset. This is also what Wolfgang was trying to use with you. Yeah. 30 minutes. 30 minutes, that's what I can reflect. Okay. So this was this system called this problem called individual fairness, so a very current problem. And it's nowadays classified, or it's soon to be classified as a high risk system. Why that? Because there is this relatively new European document, the so-called AI Act, that classifies this as high risk. Okay? And just because I finished a paper about the AI Act this week, I will give you a small introduction to the AI Act. I hope this is okay for you. So, what do we have to know about the AI Act? Okay, it regulates the use of AI in Europe or outside Europe if it has an effect in Europe. It was decided on May 21, and it was signed on June 13, and it will likely be published in July. And then it gets into force, but some parts have 1 year sleep time, and some parts have 2 years sleep time. But in 2 years, this AI Act will be enforced for, let's say, software in Europe. And this is based, they had to start somewhere, so they started from a safety standard. So like for machine safety and so forth, right? And you can see this in the document. There is a lot of safety reasoning, so to speak, in there, which is a bit funny, but that's what it is. And so it's about AI systems and it's about risk. Okay. Now, what is an AI system? An AI system can infer how to generate outputs from inputs or data. Now, what is outputs? Outputs here is, especially I find interesting, decisions. But decisions which can influence physical or virtual environments. Right? So that have a direct impact, so to speak, on the people. Right? which obviously here is the admission example for this university thing is obviously decisions that have effect. But it's also predictions, content, recommendations. Okay. Then interesting word in this sentence is infer. And the inference talks about machine learning. We are not surprised about that. Inference by machine learning approaches that learn from data how to achieve certain objectives. Or, and that is a bit inconvenient, logic and knowledge-based approaches that derive from recorded knowledge or from symbolic representations of the task to be solved. Okay. Now, I have some examples later where we're going to discuss together whether this is AI or not. No, this is from the text. This is literally from the text. This is Article 3.1 and Recital 12. They are not long to read, and I encourage you to read them 5 times and then to build an opinion. So I think what saves, and then there's this extra thing, AI systems have some degree of independence of actions from human involvement and of capabilities to operate without human intervention. Which I guess for a logic-based system we would, I mean, once the logic is defined, I mean, a logic-based system would qualify as that, right? Okay. Now, I am a logician to some extent, so I was a bit worried that now all I do is falling under the AI Act. And I think the important 3 words are these ones, namely how to generate. So it's not about inferring outputs from inputs. It's about inferring how to generate outputs from inputs. Okay, so this is, let's say, meta-reasoning. Okay, and then it goes through the document. I mean, whenever you try to combine the sentences, there is always the how-to is there. That is supposed to be distinguishing for AI. Okay. Now, I talked to the logicians in my Sonderforschungsbereich who knows of a logic system that can infer how to generate, let's say, logical outcomes, and there was agreement that this set is like empty. Good. I know. Good. Anyway, so it was about systems and it was about risks. So how about risks? Well, there are 3 risks that are distinguished. The top one is unacceptable risk, which means things that are just forbidden, right? And yeah, you can imagine what this is. Some of those are allowed in other societies, but in Europe they are forbidden. Like social scoring is allowed in some Asian countries. Okay. Minimal risk is gaming and so forth and so forth. So the interesting part is the one in the middle, so-called high risk, which is including standard safety. So autonomous driving is in principle included, but also access to education, hiring, immigration, policing, and these kind of things, right? So individual rights are here. Okay. Now, this triangle is called the pyramid, but I find it important to say that the shape has no semantics. It seems to say that there should be fewer cases in the top than in the bottom part, but we don't know. I mean, if you have this pyramid about food and so forth, then it has a meaning, right? And in the top there should be little blah, right? But here this is just for illustrative purposes.
And they are independent, the various levels.
They are supposed to.
And filters have nothing to do with hiring.
Yes, they are supposed to be independent, yeah. Yeah, they're supposed to be independent, yeah. So we now know about risk and we know about systems. So I have here 4 examples. I'm sorry that these are long sentences. And the question is, which of them is AI and which of them is high risk? Okay, I read the first one to you. A compiler for a high-level programming language used to compile the code to run an airbag controller, regardless of its potential excessive complexity. Okay, so is this high risk? Answer, yes. Yeah, because it's not only about the system, it's also about the design phase that goes through the system. So if in the design phase you use tools that are AI, you may fall under the Act. Okay? Now, okay, so this is high risk. That's clear. But it's not AI. That's a good thing. Because it's only rule-based logic and so forth, and it doesn't do interesting stuff.
It does not fall under the AI.
It is meant not to be AI. There's an explicit clause that says human-made rule-based systems should be excluded. While logic-based systems, which are of course also human-made rule-based, are included if they are able to infer how to generate. Okay, and these are the next two examples. A purely logic-based system that can infer how to decide whether the airbag inside some car has to ignite, that is high risk, and it is AI, but it's likely not existing. While the next line, a purely logic-based system that can infer whether the airbag inside some car has to ignite, that's fine. Okay? Okay, and then the last one is the obvious one, namely a system which ignites airbags based on machine-learned data. Right? That is, okay. So the answer is all of them are high risk, and two of them are AI. And likely the category, the upper category that is labeled AI, likely is empty. But if you have another opinion, I would be pleased to hear this. If you're working on knowledge-based system, you can replace logic-based by knowledge-based, and the same applies. Okay, good. So now assume you have a high-risk AI system. So you read the right. So I just finished this paper. If you want, you can have it, right? We are submitting this now, but we have kind of a guideline through the AI Act. And what I discussed with you is, I discussed with you more or less this part here a bit, and then there's another part about general purpose AI, which is large language models, basically, right? But it's only about models. So it's either about systems, these are things that can do something. Peter, you had them also, right? You had this general purpose AI, and then you have wrapped it into some kind of user interface. So that would be here still, it would be a system. And then it's about models, which is the base technology, so to speak. This is for general purposes, is classified. And there's some other things. I cannot go through that because I will run out of time, and I want to tell you other stuff. So, if you are now having a high-risk AI system, then it's relatively easy. What you have to do, there are 5 steps. First step is you find out, this is high risk. Then step 2 is, and that's the only important step, conformance assessment. You have to check whether it conforms to a number of articles in the AI Act. This is like 20 pages that you have to read. And then comes, you have to register it in the database, you have to sign some declaration and look for a CE stamp, and if you have made changes, you have to go back to step 2. So step 2 is the important one. Now, what is step 2? Conformity. Conformity is these paragraphs, Article 9 to Article 15. This is about high-risk AI and what you have to do. And I suggest to read them. So there are things about testing in there, about documentation, about transparency obligation, and I think you can write papers about each of those. We wrote a paper about human oversight, so I will show you a bit what we did with human oversight. So you can do, I think you can do interesting research in this corner nowadays. This is Article 14, or it's 14.4, and it is a bit of text. And it says, okay, so what's the idea? The idea is you have a high-risk AI system. There must be a human overseer. There must be a person who checks the outputs of the system. Okay, and that person must have certain competences, and the technical design must be so that it supports the human oversight person, right? So the technical system, this is what it says up there, for the purpose of the paragraphs that I didn't show you, shall provide the deployer to the deployer in such a way that to whom oversight is assigned are enabled as appropriate. Okay, so the technical design of the system must allow a couple of things. Now, I'm just highlighting a few words here to show you the range. At the bottom, you see that every high-risk AI system must have a stop button. Okay? Now I go to A. Every AI system must be so that the human overseer can properly understand the relevant capacity and limitation of the high-risk AI system. Right? Also, the human overseer must remain aware of the so-called automation bias. And the technical system must support that the human overseer is aware, right? And so forth and so forth. So it's quite a range of so ein Wunderkorb, so ein flower, a bouquet of flowers, what human oversight to do. What's another better word? Doesn't it? Okay. So now I got together with legal people, philosophers, psychologists and me, or us as computer scientists in our Sonderforschungsbereich, and we arranged this in a paper that appeared a few weeks ago in ASO Fact. In order to have effective human oversight, what you need is, well, let me not go into the detail, but you need a few things, namely epistemic access, self-control, and causal power. So you need to be able, essentially, to do your task, and you must have good intentions when doing that. Just being able to do your task doesn't mean you're a good overseer, right? Okay, now this is known as moral responsibility in the ethics literature, so to speak. So it's actually the only thing that the technical design should support is that the person who has the duty of human oversight is actually morally responsible, and that means, for instance, that he can have an effect on the system, right? That otherwise he's not responsible, and so forth. And the person should have fit attention. Yes?
Is there a penalty if the overseer makes a mistake in order to...
Yeah. This is actually the trick. This is the trick. You see this already in the German Autonomous Driving Act. They also have the idea of a technische Aufsicht, and then it is the duty of the owner of the car to ensure against mistakes of the oversight. So it is essentially it's no longer the programmers that are responsible for the systems. It is at the end the human oversight who is responsible, but there is an insurance that covers the risk. Okay, so it's just a trick to get back accountability, basically, in a system where it's diluted by machine learning analysis. Yeah. Okay, thank you for the question. So, and then if you have this, you can match this with the. I'm flashing this only to show you a bit. I mean, this is research that I don't do regularly. It's there, as I say, I'm talking to philosophers and law people, and we are trying to classify a bit what is in these legal texts, and this is what comes out. Okay.
What does the stop button mean in the end? I'm speaking of an airplane, right?
Yeah, good. So indeed, if you're using high-risk AI for systems that don't have a fail-safe state, then good luck for the oversight. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think this is. I think, yeah. And of course, they have all these clauses that it should be according to the state of the art and so forth and so forth. So standard safety technology is not taken out of the loop.
I believe that also comes from technical systems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Indeed. They took the safety standards basically. Yeah. So, okay, here you see, if you go a bit deeper, then you can look at the different facilitators and inhibitors of effective human oversight. And then there are only a few that are technical, right? The rest is, well, these are things that psychologists talk about then, right? Exhaustion, motivation, and so forth, right? But in this corner of technical design, this is where software engineering happens, basically. There are still some things that you can do. Right, so you can, these are the standard techniques that you have in order to somehow work on these parameters, right? For instance, explain by AI, runtime monitors, parameter tuning, and so forth. And here is, I will come back to that. So I'm going to show you a particular example that basically we are going to put into this case of the university admission. Okay, and it's basically we're making the system more adaptable, we're making the system more understandable, and we are actually doing pre-selection of outputs to revenue. So this is what we're going to do. So the idea is there is a number of applications that are coming in, and the overseer has the task to look at them and to say, this score is correct, this score is correct, this score is correct, this score is correct, this 25,000 corrects, and then somebody should say incorrect. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is something that allows kind of pre-filtering. If this pre-filtering would be using AI, then there would have to be an overseer for that, because it's still high risk. Okay, so the overseer uses a system. That system is AI, then it's still high risk, so there must be another overseer for that. Okay, good. Okay, we go back to the example. So what we learned is this is high risk This is obviously AI, so we need a human overseer. And the human overseer now sees this input, and for this input has to decide the score 0 and 7 is too high. Okay? Now what do we do? We have seen this. We are taking our robustness definition from our cleanness definition from the beginning. The simplest one is, okay, the black eye is now one candidate, right? And the blue eye is a synthetic candidate that we kind of made up. That is in distance close, right? But the output distance, the score, is now too far off. Okay, so we just take the same thing. This is what we actually do there. And so how does this go together? There is a paper by Cynthia Dwork, Moritz Hart, and some other. Moritz Hart, MBA Tübingen now, right? This paper is 4,000 citations now. And it is very close to what we have. It's using a Lipschitz idea. So basically, you have a Lipschitz, you have constant L, and if you have two inputs, then a multiple of that input distance is a bound for the output distance. This is what they do, right? Okay. So, and of course, if you are in this situation where think of Lipschitz, right? Lipschitz gives you an upper bound on the slope on the gradient, right? If you're in such a situation, then you wouldn't want that. You want a kind of dynamically changing thing, right? That is one thing. And the other problem that this definition has is it ranges over all input pairs, right? So in order to understand whether something is fair, you have to look at all input pairs. Okay? So like all the people on the planet. Okay. Right? So it's not only those that submit the application, it is right? It is the form. So this makes it difficult to use in practice. So we are basically changing this a bit. One thing is we are putting in a function in order to generalize from the Lipschitz constant. Then the other thing is that we are restricting one side of the inputs to those that are really present. Okay, so we are saying this is like in the automotive case we had this one NEDC and that was given, and we only have to compare with that. Now here we are only comparing with those who are actually in the pool of applicants, but for each of them we go to all others in order to find whether there is a kind of counterexample against this process. Okay? So that's the structure. And then if the number of applicants is finite, which usually it is, this becomes monitorable. So you can build a runtime monitor that looks over the system input by input and gives something. And of course, we also formalize that, again, we need kind of a contract. Someone has to tell us the input distance of persons, right? Which is not so obvious, right? I mean, this is actually very critical, right? So basically here, I mean, this is like the ground truth, right? We have the CVs, and then from there we see how the person looked like, and this is the input distance, right? This is not only in our work; it's also in the early work of Mozart. But there it's a bit bumpy. But at least we make this clear. We put this in a contract. We assume there is this distance. Okay, good. Now, and once we have that, okay, this is how it looks like. We have this situation. We have a point. This would be a black point, right? And then we get a score for that. And now we put a system around it that basically gives us another score, namely how fair this was, and it may give us a counterexample. And the counterexample is basically this blue dot, right? So another input that is in my distance, so that the outputs are too far away. The scores are too far away, right? Yeah. And then, I'm not sure I showed you this, but this is basically repeating. It's trying to connect this to what you've seen before. So this is in a sense, this probabilistic falsification that we are doing. We are now searching Monte Carlo style. We are searching for an adversarial example if you so wish, right? And this is how what this looks like. It's a bit ugly, but the two things are connected. And then what do we get? Well, what you see here is like three examples, namely what's the idea? Here we have the cross, the red cross is the input, if I remember well, and then we have this bluish hexagon, is it? No, pentagon, bluish pentagon, and the bluish one is synthesized, right? And the score, even though it's close, the score that it has is much higher, right? There, in the next example, in the middle, it is much lower, right? And then, okay, here's a situation where all those that are close have a similar height, so to speak, right? You can also translate this to the individual case. So the human overseer now says, okay, in order to be admitted to our university, the student, the score should be greater than 0.5. So Eugene would be admitted, Alexa, right, greater, she would not be admitted, and John would be admitted. But the ground truth is that John had poor grades. Okay? And then here are, and I mean, these are now synthesized, right? They are not necessarily existing, but they are plausible according to our story, right? And that now gives the oversight person a justified way to reason about whether the decision was justified or not, right? And then it may happen that Alex at the end is accepted and John is rejected or not, right? This then depends on the insight of the oversight person. So, luckily I'm now at the end of my presentation. I guess I was out of time. No, I'm not? Okay.
4 minutes.
Then I talk now very slow. I have shown you 2 papers that have appeared. And as I say, I advertise the third one. If you want to read this and give comments, I happily give this out. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Maybe there are some questions. Yes.
The problem with the synthesized outputs, when you control the one more back,
Okay.
with the graphics.
Yeah.
No, not one. Even before.
Before.
It's the original one.
I don't remember. Here. Yeah. Okay.
And how do I really understand that your contract of fairness makes sure that the I prime on the left is not as biased as a result of the entire thing? Because if your representatives are biased, synthesized, you get also wrong outputs on the other side, right? Very simple, you could say different races are very distant.
Yeah, okay.
And then you
So,
could never see
I mean,
the different race and different outcome.
I mean, there's a huge problem in defining these distances and to make sure that they are discrimination free. There's a huge problem. I absolutely agree with you. And I mean, there are all these results, like there is like indirect discrimination in the data, even though if you take out the gender, if you take out the race and so forth, still just because they have their account at the same kind of post office and so forth, right? You can deduce something or not. And this is a huge problem. And I'm happy if you say because of that, this is not usable. I'm just saying that many other things are becoming unusable.
That wasn't my point. My point was, afterwards you have this contract where you define how you define these distances. At least it's transparent, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, so I assume that someone gives me the distance function. This is a typical abstraction, right? Someone gives me the distance function, I work with that. And then it's difficult to get to the distance function. That is a criticism that is very well correct. And whether that affects our approach, maybe yes, if it's completely unrealistic to have the distance function, but I mean, right? So
you have to take care of that.
Okay, that was
Couldn't you, as an alternative, use the performance of the ones that you have accepted before and use that crew to validate the initial scores on your fairness formula?
So this is a very interesting and realistic question, because of course we are. I mean, when we do admission, we do kind of that, right? We look at the people from, I don't know, some country and say, okay, have they performed from that university, from that place, and so forth and so forth. Now, interestingly, we don't know the performance of those who didn't come, right? Either because we admitted them and they didn't come, or because we rejected them because we consider them too weak. So we only have those that are actually there, which is right? But I mean, of course.
That wasn't totally true. I think they had, as a reference, they had all the people inside the company who performed. And then they thought back, are these the criteria? And if you never take someone from a specific country, you will never take one. So the value is the same as the data.
This discussion should be stopped now. We have a lot of
Because what happens in universities could share that knowledge, and then one has. My question was a little bit more technical. In the literature of fairness, what is the intuition to choose a function, and what kind of function do you have in mind?
I mean, function gives us generality, right? So
why do you need it? And why?
Well, it could, for instance, it could accommodate this, right? It could accommodate the plot on the, if we know that there is some sort of different slopes in the evaluation function, so to speak, then we could accommodate for that. Okay, I mean that's what, and I agree. It gives you even more freedom to choose, and you right?
So I feel that you completely lose the fairness criteria here if you choose it too strange your function.
You need some dogs.
Maybe. Yeah.
detailed question, and then I think we should finish.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your interesting talk, Holger. Actually, I have two questions which are quite related. You already talked about that your modeling is about continuous modeling, so you do not use discrete systems. I fully agree that the first case seems to be very continuous, but the second case I'm not really convinced that it's a good idea to use a continuous model of this case, because you have so many discrete variables, and maybe you can talk about it a bit more while you still use a continuous standard.
So,
the second question is really related. If you assume a distance function, which is defined on real numbers, then you directly assume that the interference of different emissions is in every case transitive. But it is well known that interference is not transitive, so you assume a case which is not realistic for that.
So you're saying we should use a semi-metric or something? Is this, I mean, I don't get this.
So I think that there are many situations in which two different emissions might be indifferent from the evaluator point of view.
Yes.
Indifference is not transitive.
So I have to think about this. I mean, so we are treating them as a part. Yeah.
This is absolutely not trivial.
Yeah, so we do treat this as a partial order, so we have elements that are unordered. And you were saying that by the score they are anyway ordered, and in a sense you're right, Yeah. Interesting. Pretty good. The first part was, well, I mean, I'm working in continuous because I have the stuff for, but no, I'm not a believer in continuous mathematics if you can also do this by discretization. I mean, so I'm happy to do it in this way. And of course then other issues arise.
I think we should stop here because we all want coffee. It's coffee break. So thank you again.